His transcendent greatness stands alone in thoroughbred racing. Secretariat brought a troubled nation to its feet in 1973, but lost in his sepia-toned Triple Crown campaign was one nagging controversy, a statistical oddity that stood for 39 years. Just how fast did Big Red run in the Preakness, and why wasn't he credited with what looked like the stakes record? Now, we will answer this question by bringing together many who were there when Secretariat claimed the middle jewel of the Triple Crown, including his legendary owner Penny Chenery, still going strong in her 90s, and jockey Ron Turcotte. Secretariat and the Preakness controversy. It's all straight ahead in the gate.
They're in the gate.
They're in the gate.
Welcome inside the American Film Institute Theater in Silver Spring, Maryland for our first ever In the Gate event, Secretariat. Timing is everything. My name is Barry Abrams. I host and produce the In the Gate podcast for ESPN.com, and we're so glad that you're with us. Normally our show is an audio offering on ESPN.com, but with so many wonderful people and such a beautiful location, we had to let everybody see this. And so we're glad that you could be here and work with us on this. When Secretariat authored his valedictory address in the Belmont Stakes, June the 9th, 1973, Jack Nicklaus, the great golfer, was one of those watching. And when Secretariat crossed the line, he did two things. Jack Nicklaus applauded, and he cried. He had spent his whole life looking for perfection in his own career, said the great writer Haywood Hale Broun. In Secretariat, Jack Nicklaus found that perfection. It was that kind of reaction, that kind of passion that Secretariat sparked that makes tonight's discussion relevant. Because while Secretariat obliterated the track records in both the Kentucky Derby and the Belmont Stakes, the latter of which by over 2 seconds, when normally records are broken in tenths of a second, a strange thing happened during the running of the Preakness, just a few furlongs up from where we are this day. The timer showed 1 minute 55 seconds, clearly slower than a lot of people thought he had run. And it was a nagging little puzzle in a story that had been codified for so many years. It took a lot of effort, but the situation was finally rectified, and that's the story into which we're going to get tonight, beginning with our wonderful panel, starting with the legendary Penny Chenery, Secretariat's owner. His jockey, Ron Turcotte. And his biographer, a man of whom we can only aspire to be as great as he is, Secretariat's biographer, Bill Nack. Miss Chenery, let's start with you. For all of the years that you have lived this story, how have your thoughts on Secretariat kind of evolved as the years have gone on?
Well, I've almost forgotten what he was really like. Because the attention he's gotten, and excuse me, Bill, but sometimes the writers have more pay more attention to themselves, possibly, than the horse. And Secretariat is he's in stone as this, and of course he was big and beautiful and strong, but he was a lot smarter than the general impression. There's a lot more about Secretariat than the prototype. My Secretariat is the horse that I could go out to the barn in the morning, and he would come to the webbing and nip at me and sort of get out of my space, you know. And he wasn't mean. He was just playful and bored and happy to do something different. And I never gave him peppermints. I did not approve. I gave him carrots. But when he didn't win, he would not be friendly. He would go stand in the corner and beat himself up. But you can love Secretariat any way you want to.
Ron, when a jockey gets on a horse, there's a certain chemistry that certain riders bond with certain horses. What was your method for bonding with Secretariat?
Actually, I think that many writers could have wanted the Secretariat. He was such a lovely horse, such a generous horse. He was a gift that you keep on giving, and I don't really take credit for writing Secretariat because he was a great horse. I mean, he was the greatest horse of all time. With Secretariat, he was so smart. You teach him something one day, the next day you head him that way, and he would just do it. Well, the funny thing about Secretariat is that one morning there was some photographer trying to get a good shot of the horse, and so I stopped him and turned his head toward the photographer. And the guy took a few shots. Next day or a couple days later, same thing happened. And I just turned his head there. Well, the next time, he heard a camera click, he stopped, and he turned around and he looked. And I said, man, you're getting smarter than me. So that's how smart he was. I mean, well, I don't mean I'm smart. That's not what I'm trying to say. But he was really a smart horse. He was kind. He was generous. I don't know exactly how to explain it. But he was the gift, like I said, the gift that keeps on giving.
It's not every day, Bill, that a person lives with a horse in a stall, unless that person happens to be the groom. You lived with this horse through the entire spring of 1973. What premonition did you have that began that process?
Well, I think when he turned the corner coming into his 3-year-old year, I was sitting at breakfast in Huntington, where I live, and I read in the New York Times that Lucian and Penny had decided, instead of staying in Florida to run in the Florida Derby, that they were coming to New York to run in the 3 races in New York, the Bayshore, the Gotham, and the Wood. And I jumped up from the breakfast table and I screamed to my family, hot damn, Secretariat's coming to New York. Because I wasn't going to Florida. And it was just about the luckiest thing that ever happened to me, aside from becoming a turf rider about 2 months after he walked on the racetrack as a maiden. And I walked on the racetrack as a maiden turf rider. And it's just like the stars were aligned. And when he came up to New York, I started hanging out. He came up, I think, March 11th. And I met him when he got off the van. There was a big story. He was Horse of the Year. He was a $6 million man. Had just been syndicated for $6.08 million. And by the way, gold at that time was selling for $70 an ounce, which made him worth 3 times his weight in gold. And that kind of caught on as a little bit of a description of him. But I just started hanging around him, and he won the Bayshore, and then he won the Gotham on the lead. And he galloped out 1.25 miles that day in the Gotham in 1:59 2, which, had he done that, if he were to do that at Churchill Downs, it would have been a new Derby record. He did that at Aqueduct, galloping out, and after running 1 mile in 1:33 and change. And so I'm thinking, this dude is for real. But I also had Penny's misgivings. She has said on more than one occasion that she didn't think he'd win the Triple Crown because she didn't know if he could get through physically because he hit the ground so hard. And I wondered, how can a horse this large, he was 1,154 pounds, how can a horse that hits the ground as hard as unlike Reaver Ridge, his stablemate who had won the Derby in '72, who skipped across the ground like Bambi. And this horse hit the ground like a stag. And I thought, how can he stay sound? Well, he had a short cannon bone, and he was beautifully made. He had beautiful flat knees, and he stood the training, which I didn't think he was going to do. So I thought I'd write a magazine story about him. And I thought, Esquire, the exploits of a Triple Crown candidate or something. I had never thought of a book until much later, or during the Triple Crown, but I thought, this was until really after the Preakness that I took it seriously. Because then it looked like, boy, this horse is going to do it. Everybody kind of said he's going to do it. But that's kind of why I started hanging around him. He was so charismatic. Not too long ago, I was down in Kentucky for the Derby, and I went to the horse park in Lexington, where there's a huge statue of Secretariat, Eddie Sweat, and Ron Turcotte that Penny raised the funding to erect the statue right near Man o' War. And I bought a paver, one of those little stones, and it's right in front of the statue. And I looked at it the other day, and I thought, at the time I wrote the paver, he only had so many words, very short. And I thought, what in a very short paver can I say about Secretariat to sort of sum him up? And I thought of a line that Charles Hatton came up with from the Daily Racing Form. After the Belmont, he said, his only point of reference is himself. And I thought, that says it as well as anything in a short period of time. And I still think that today. And if we had 2 hours, I could explain to you why, but I don't so often.
But we are just getting started here on this In the Gate event. Secretariat, timing is everything. When we come back, we'll get into the controversy surrounding the 1973 Preakness. Stay with us.